warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. In segment number 2, we're going to be joined by Ryan McIntyre. He does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network with their show, The College Experience, and we've got a lot to talk about in terms of these NBA draft decisions. We've got fewer decisions than in the past, but it feels like we've got some very monumental ones. Didn't even get into Koa Pitu. I think he's going to be staying in the NBA draft, but he's got a big one for Arizona. Certainly going to be diving in on Milan Mimasilovic because he's the main guy that is currently in the draft that's also in the transfer portal, and I know that Kentucky very, very much wants Mr. Milan, so we're going to be talking about that. Alan Graves is out there. LSU wants him. Didn't even get into that one as much. I was talking a lot about Tyler Tanner. Henry Visar, it feels like he's probably going to be staying in the draft, but we're going to talk about that one as well. We're going to talk with Ryan as well about what we've been seeing in terms of these ACC and these Big 12 schools that maybe were towards the bottom of the conference as well. They've done a nice job in terms of rising up. With Ryan, he does a great job in terms of looking at all things West Virginia athletics, so certainly have to talk about their offseason since we last spoke to him. Jusan Sanan, they land him as well, so we've got a lot to be able to discuss there. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Probably going to get some shorter first segments here until we do get the decisions on the NBA draft because we just had the combine yesterday. By the way, I should be throwing this in here as well. I know that there are quite a few people that listen to this podcast that were fans of Brandon Clark and all that he did over at Gonzaga. Very unfortunate that he passed away on Tuesday, age of 29. Too young. Like, I'm 33 years old myself, so you want to wish him well. Rest in peace to Brandon Clark. Hopefully his family is all good and everything like that. Hate to be able to see that, but you know what, when it comes to these NBA draft decisions, there are a lot of guys that they do have some monumental decisions. We'll also talk with Ryan about how the dynamic between whether to stay or go this year has been different in the past and why you really do want to be paying attention to these, because who knows if Michigan gets the title this past season, if Yaxel Lenderborg, who was very much on the cut line, whether or not he wanted to stay in the NBA draft or not. There were some people that thought he might be as good as a lottery pick. Him pulling out, going to Michigan, that was an ultimate game changer for them. And hey, Morris Johnson, he's right now in the NBA draft as well. We're going to be talking about that. So we do have a lot of NBA draft to talk about in segment number 2. In the final segment, we're going to get you more of the actual transfers that we saw in college basketball on Tuesday. Again, I think that's going to be very slow these next few days until we do see these guys and what they're going to be doing with regards to the draft decisions. And then some schools might be needing to make contingency plans. Some guys might be signing up these guys that decide to come back to school. So we're going to be doing that in the final segment, and we'll chat it up with our good friend Ryan next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by this man. As we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard, he's doing such an amazing job looking at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, where they do a little bit of everything with their show, The College Experience. If you love college basketball, obviously they've got you covered there, but they do college football. This time of year, college baseball is in full swing as the chase for Omaha is on. That's always a lot of fun. Heck, even when we had the Frozen Four, they were doing a great job on the hockey front. It's always college sports season, and it's always a season where Ryan McIntyre is working hard. He also does the Ryan and Rush Show for those who are fans of West Virginia athletics, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled MAC. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Always appreciate it, Greg. Good to talk college hoops.
It's always great to be able to have you aboard. And Ryan, right now as we're doing this, we're going through the NBA Combine sort of situation where you've got a few guys on the borderline. And I want to get your thoughts here because while we don't have as many guys that, in my opinion, have decisions as to whether or not to stay in the draft or to come back to school, I do think that the actual magnitude and the actual weight of these decisions might actually be bigger for these guys than ever before, because I think that we've got some big ones this season.
Well, yeah, you could make the argument last year that the final NBA draft decision led to what was the national championship. We were waiting on Lendenberg. He had transferred from UAB, and then he was looking at the NBA, or he was going to go to Michigan. Ultimately ended up coming back to school, went to Michigan, got a nice bag of cash, got a national championship, and the rest is history. So got some big names on the board. I think these decisions are getting better and better from a standpoint that guys can, because of NIL, can really value, is it better to go to the NBA or is it better to come back to school to improve your stock? Because for a while there, I just thought that everybody was chasing the bag and the dream of going to the NBA. And I know that's the ultimate goal. But I think when you can get to that second and third contract in the NBA, that's where the real money is, not your rookie deal.
Yep, and sometimes when you go into the NBA a little bit too early, you get stuck in the G League and everything like that, and you might as well be going back to college because you get much more exposure at the college level rather than the G League, even if the G League might be a little bit of a higher level as well. So I always think that that's a good way of looking at it as well. And obviously, while we don't have a ton of big decisions, the one that we do have are absolutely massive, like Milan Mimasilovic. I think that might be the biggest one because he could go back to Iowa State. He could stay in the NBA draft, but I know there's a lot of rumors looking at you, Kentucky, that absolutely want him to be going into back to school and going into the transfer portal. How do you look at that one? Because I think that out of all the guys that are both in the NBA draft and the transfer portal, he's the biggest one because I think that he could truly be a game changer for someone.
For sure, Greg. Momcilovic, he's got all the leverage right now. I think ultimately he does come back to school because of what we talked about. Lendenberg got the big bag cash. Heck, even the year before that, it was Coleman Hawkins at Kansas State. He waited that out. Being the last guy, the highest profile guy on the board, definitely has a lot of perks to it. So I think he ends up in Kentucky ultimately because Kentucky's got to get somebody, and the Kentucky name and brand still does sell. But hey, nothing's for sure. You never know. Other guys would love to have a 6'8", 6'9" wing that can make shots from all three levels. So Momcilovic, great. I wish he had stayed at Iowa State. I was a little bit surprised because usually the guys don't leave Iowa State, but definitely looking for a big bag of cash here.
Absolutely. He has entered in the transfer portal. He could go back to Iowa State if he wanted to, but it sounds like from the way that you were addressing that, it seems like you don't think that he would be able to, because we both know that Iowa State as well, even though they don't necessarily have that star player that they've added here in the transfer portal, they certainly did have a lot of guys here in the offseason.
And their culture, them in Houston, it's plug and play. You know what you're getting with Iowa State and Houston with Otzelberger and Sampson. They're going to guard you. They're going to trap you for 40 minutes, and it's bigger than just one guy. So I don't think he'll go back once you leave at a program like Iowa State. I don't think that he'll end up going back. So I look for him to go to a bigger, higher profile program historically. Like I said, probably Kentucky.
Yeah, that would be a very big get for Kentucky because, man, they've got as many role players as you could want under the sun, but, man, they need someone to be able to really be able to elevate and give you a little bit more offense, a little bit more shot making, and that would certainly fit the bill. And a man that always fits the bill for giving us great insights, that'd be our good friend Ryan McIntyre joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. And then obviously another big one is Tyler Tanner, because I would argue that for Vanderbilt, they really need him to come back, because if they get him back, they're going to have a rock-solid backcourt, because I think that they made some solid additions here in the portal, but we both know that Vanderbilt was based around really good guard play, really good three-point shooting last season. It just feels like there's a big drop-off with the roster right now without him. If he comes back, because he didn't necessarily measure out the world's greatest at the Combine, I think that would be a total game changer for them, especially with what we've seen out of Florida and Tennessee here in the offseason.
They've spent Todd Golden and Rick Barnes. So I think Tanner, it would be best if he comes back. That would really secure that backcourt. Mark Byington's done a great job in just 2 years flipping that program into back-to-back NCAA tournaments. And I look for him to do it again in year 3, but getting Tanner back would be essential for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's one of the biggest ones that is currently on the board, and I look at that one being big, and I think that this is a nice ancillary one as well. With Morris Johnson over at Michigan, obviously Michigan is going to be fine without him. They don't go from being a team that's in the title hunt to being like, oh, outside the top 25 or anything like that if Morris Johnson doesn't come back, because they've done a great job. They've got JP Estrella as a insurance policy / a guy that they're going to be able to rely upon down low. But how do you look at that one as well? Because Johnson is a guy that, in my opinion, some people feel like he came a little bit out of nowhere last season. I always knew that he was solid over Illinois. Certainly took a nice stride forward this last season, because I think that Ade Mero is just as good as gone. If Michigan can get him, that's great. But I think that he's pretty much as good as gone. But I think Morris Johnson is an interesting name as well on the board.
Yeah, and he's kind of a do-it-all type guy, roll guy, glue guy. He was great in that title run, and he was able to make some shots too. So either way, they're bigger than just one guy. I'm sure Dusty May and that staff would like him back for another run at what could be back-to-back.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that that's going to be another big one. And then the other one that I have started is Henry Visar. It sounds like he's probably going to be pretty content with staying in the NBA draft, but I'm very interested to see what may be happening with him, because for North Carolina, it's year number 1 under Michael Malone, and you know that they could use a guy like that, because I look at this North Carolina roster right now, and I just don't necessarily know what it's going to be right now. Part of that is because we just don't know what Michael Malone is going to be doing at the college level as well, going from coaching up the Denver Nuggets to now coaching the North Carolina Tar Heels. That's a big, giant transition right there, but I think that Visar and his decision is also a massive one.
It is, yeah. A lot of these programs are left in limbo because of the way that this is set up, but Visar definitely a big domino to fall. We'll see what happens there. Like I said, if it's this late, usually I think they end up coming back just because they have all the leverage and can basically pick and choose where they want to go.
Yep, they certainly can, and with a guy like Visar, we know that North Carolina, they've got money to spend, and I know that they spent a lot of money on Malone, but it doesn't feel like they necessarily spent every last waking penny as well that they could have in terms of bringing guys via the transfer portal. I recognize that Nicolas Avedeas is a relatively solid add, and just how do you take a look at North Carolina in an ACC where there's been a lot of offseason moves? Like, even though Virginia hasn't added a lot of guys via the portal, we know they've done a great job with regards to their roster retention. Louisville was obviously one of the biggest spenders in the offseason, and even some of these lower level teams like a Boston College, like a Georgia Tech, I feel like the ACC has gotten much better here in the offseason.
In back-to-back years that it feels like they're finally honing up. If you're going to win, you got to be able to spend. Louisville back-to-back years is really spent. We'll see if that can translate to more success, because I would argue that they kind of underachieved, all things considered. I know they won an NCAA tournament game, but all things considered, I think it was a little bit underwhelming for Louisville considering how much they spent on that roster.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I wanted to see a little bit more out of them. And speaking of Louisville, do you think that they're going to need to change around their style a little bit this season? Because I do look at the overall spending of them, bringing in Flory Badunga, the 7-foot freshman as well, and it just feels like the way that they shot over 52% of their shots from three-point range just isn't conducive to making a big run in the NCAA tournament. It's why I always have like qualms with taking Alabama too deep in my bracket, because you know that with all that volatility, with all the shot variance, just one bad night knocks you out of an NCAA tournament, and it does feel like Pat Kelsey has looked himself in the mirror, and I do expect Louisville to look a little bit different this season with their offense.
Well, and I would also say, Greg, whenever they, back to my point of underachieving, yeah, they won a lot of games, but they just beat up on the bottom half of the league. And I thought that whenever they had to punch up against Duke or Carolina or whoever, they kind of just got manhandled in the front court against Virginia too. I just think that finally getting a little bit more physical, getting a guy like Badunga, that comes from a program like Kansas that throws the ball inside and can protect the rim, I think that could take Louisville to another level. They're still going to shoot a bunch of threes. That's what Kelsey did at Charleston as well. But I think at least you have a rim protector now and a guy that can get some easy ones. Sometimes nowadays we see it in the NBA playoffs. These guys just fall in love with shooting contested three after contested three. It's all right to throw the ball inside every now and then.
Yep, absolutely. I'm right there with you. They're still going to take a bunch of threes. I don't think it's going to be quite 52+% of their shots from three-point range, because when it comes to the analytics, you always want to be able to get a three or a layup. Now you're able to get more layups with those guys as well. So that'll be helpful. And what's always helpful is having Ryan McIntyre aboard right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ryan, we talk about the bottom half of the ACC getting better. I know that I've already addressed this with you in the offseason once or twice about the bottom half of the Big 12, and then a team that you follow very closely was more in the middle half of the Big 12 in terms of West Virginia. And I want to get your thoughts on some of the moves that they made, because we were talking with you earlier in the offseason when we knew that they were going to be getting Mohamed Siala, Javon Buchanan, but since we last spoke, Martin Somerville is now in the fold, Jusan Sanan, and I really feel bullish about this West Virginia team, especially now that we've got 76 teams in the NCAA tournament, of being able to get back to the tournament and really being a force and a team that can be able to win a game or two if they do make it there.
If it had been 76 the last couple of years, they would be in the tournament back-to-back years, but that's a conversation for another day. But I think Ross Hodge and company, the staff, got to go through the gauntlet once and see what the Big 12 is, what you need to win. I know him and McCaslin are really tight at Texas Tech. He had a leg up there with having that relationship. But yeah, they've spent more. The freshman's going to be really good, Sadler. So I really like this Mountaineer team in year number 2. And I felt like it was a culture year. I didn't think Hodge was going to bend his culture just to win a couple more ball games. They won the games that they were supposed to. They just didn't have the Jimmies and Joes in year 1 to beat a team like Arizona, Houston, Iowa State, or Kansas.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to be able to stack up in a Big 12 that I'm sure that you agree with me. Houston looking very strong coming into this upcoming season. Arizona looking very strong as well. And I mean, with the way that Cincinnati's been able to revamp, it might take them a year or two to be able to get back to prominence, but absolutely love the offseason that they, Arizona State, Kansas State have all had with regards to those coaching hires. So I do feel like the bottom half of that league has gotten so much better. And I do want this last one to be dealer's choice here. Is there a team or two that you're just noticing right now in the offseason is not getting the love that they deserve? It could be a power conference team, a mid-major conference team. It could be just a team in general that you're just feeling really good about, and there's not a lot of people talking about them.
You just mentioned them. I'll go Arizona State, Greg. I like this fit. I love Randy Bennett as a coach. Felt like we talked about it numerous times on this show. They just underachieved year after year under Bobby Hurley. They have money. They have resources. He brings over Rick Croy as associate head coach, who won a bunch of games at Cal Baptist. Heck, got to the NCAA tournament. He worked for him at St. Mary's. I like the portal class that they brought in. It just feels like in the Big 12, there's less and less easy outs once again this year.
Yep, I love what Arizona State has been able to do, bringing over some of the St. Mary's guys as well. Paulius Marsoukas coming on over. And how about Rick Croy coming in as well? He was able to lead Cal Baptist to the NCAA tournament. He's got a guy or two that's coming on over from there, and just the Big West in general. I really think that Arizona State, they needed for so long to get out of the Bobby Hurley business. I guess that they were very content with their vacations to Dayton every March. And when those dried up, they decided, all right, now we finally have to make a move. We want to get back to Dayton. But that said, I really do think that Arizona State has been able to elevate, just like you elevate this podcast, my friend. Ryan, you're doing such great work looking at all things college sports, all things West Virginia, and so much more. So love the good people at home. Know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Always appreciate it, Greg. At Moneyline_Mac for my personal, over on X, Instagram, all the different platforms. And then the college experience year round. Getting ready to queue up 138 college football team previews, and then we're breaking down the portal, and our coaches tour will start here probably around Memorial Day, and then we'll ride that out through the summer. We're really looking forward to a big summer, and always appreciate you having me on, brother.
Absolutely. Can't wait till we get a little bit more clarity to be able to break down these rosters in a bit more depth as well, because still a lot of question marks, but a man that is doing a great job of sifting through it all is Ryan. So big thanks, Ryan McIntyre, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and we saw college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always a pleasure to be joined by our guy, Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So a big thanks to Ryan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. This, I think, is a good one for Prairie View. Jalen Lee, he last season was over at Texas State. He actually began his career over at Texas A&M. Just really couldn't cut it at either school, but comes from a Texas State team that they always instill good hard defense. They're always looking to generate turnovers. He goes on over to Prairie View, a Prairie View program that they're much like Texas State. They are within the same state for one. Two, it's a program that is always looking to generate turnovers, have active hands. Recognize they didn't see a whole bunch of minutes or anything like that when he was over at Texas A&M or Texas State, but I think that he's going to be able to fit the system relatively well. Has a little bit of size for Prairie View. They're also bringing in Sebastian Tidor, who is a 6'5", little bit of a combo guy over at Portland State this last season, and Jalen Wharton, who should be able to give them some size from Northern Illinois. So some nice adds here for Prairie View. It's a little bit slow going for them, but I feel like they're doing a solid job in terms of being able to fill out this roster. Maxim Logue, he was supposed to be going to North Carolina. He was over at Florian Lank last year. He averaged about 5 points, 3 rebounds per game. Has good athleticism, has yet to really put it together, and Memphis is rolling the dice on him. For Memphis, I actually feel like they've done a better job in terms of being able to set up this roster than they have in the past, because for Memphis, what has always been the issue for this team is turnovers. Bringing in Jaden Reed from Northwestern, I thought was a step in the right direction. Talik Weeks should be able to do a solid job down low. You bring in a nice three-point shooter in Rehard Varvers from Washington State. I feel like this is a nice upside get. Luke Almendover, I really like him from Southeast Missouri State. Problem is, I just don't trust him Penny Hardaway as a coach. Like, Josh Holloway was a nice ad. Brandon Cummings was a good ad. Like, Memphis on paper should absolutely be able to run and hide with the American. I just don't think that they're going to be able to do so because Penny Hardaway is still their coach. So there's that aspect of things. You've got a Mahoney heading on over to Denver. Spencer Mahoney. He was a redshirt last season. 2 years ago, he was able to see a little bit of run. He was over at Temple. He was only averaging about a point per contest. Began his career over at Cal, and he's going to be able to look to find his footing. He's actually a guy that's actually from Red Rock Academy out here in lovely Las Vegas, so I know a little bit about him. 6'9", a little bit of a stretch of floor player that I think is going to be able to offer a little bit of upside if Denver's looking to him to be the end-all be-all. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to deliver that, but as we know, Denver, they absolutely love three-point shooting, and they were absolutely lambasted down low last season. He should be able to give this team a little bit of size, be able to give you a few boards, and he's able to pop it from three, and they bring in CJ Highland, nice three-point shooter over at Western Carolina. Trey Caddy was part of a North Florida team that all they did was shoot threes. You also have Cam Martin, who is a solid player over at Samford. So they've done a nice job in terms of setting up this roster. Again, I have no idea where the defense is going to be coming from, but the offense is very rock solid. For Indiana, they've had a lot of signings here in the offseason. This, you have to figure it's going to be a depth at. Justin Mondin, he last season was over at Maryland Eastern Shore. He was averaging about 6 points per game. I mean, he was a solid player, but I mean, he was a junior last year over at Maryland Eastern Shore, averaging 6 points per game, and now he heads on over to Indiana. I have to figure that he's going to be a practice player. He's going to be making a little bit of NIL for helping out the team and everything like that, so you feel good for him. That said, if this is a move that Indiana is thinking is going to be changing their roster tremendously, I think that they've got another thing coming, especially when you add Marcus Burton on over from Notre Dame, Aiden Terrell is over at Alabama, Samat Yedoglu, I always say that name wrong, the big man from SMU. There's a depth add, like Bryce Lindsey is coming over from Villanova, Darren Harris from Duke. I don't know where the minutes are going to be, so I have to think that this is to just fill out the roster and fill out the roster only. And then for Delaware State, they're just looking for any sort of talent whatsoever, and I like this ad for them. They haven't added too much here in the offseason. Isaiah Sullivan, 6'7" combo player, was over at Division II Bridgeport, was able to put up 17 points, pair of assists, shot it relatively well from three. This is going to be able to help them out tremendously. They just need to find, I mean, if I'm calling it what it is, darn near anything whatsoever to be able to get the ball rolling. Delaware State, they've been a team that has been really struggling over the last few seasons. Being able to get an ad like this, I think, is very good for them. So you'd love to be able to see that. Another really good Division II guy, Ken Walker. He was over at Division II Davenport. Really good bowling school, by the way. They used to go up against us in bowling. I used to be at UW Oshkosh. Davenport would always kick our rear end. And Ken Walker, he was kicking some rear end at the Division II ranks. 21.5 points, shot 37% from 3. He decides that he's heading on over to St. Peter's. This is big for a St. Peter's team that they always just have a tough time scoring, always an amazing defense, always a lackluster offense. Being able to get a guy that's able to bomb it from three-point range, that's going to be able to help them out. And St. Peter's has had themselves a relatively nice offseason. Maybe not like just absolute earth-shattering moves or anything like that, but they've done a nice job in terms of doubling down with regards to their defense. They bring in quite a few of these non-D1 guys that I think are going to be able to have quite a bit of upside with St. Peter's. I think that they're once again going to be very rock solid out there in the MAC, so I do like this move for them, and I do think that adding him is really going to be able to elevate this offense. Amar Aku, he was over at Florida Atlantic last season. He has decided that he is going to North Texas, so he's staying within the American end. He had himself a solid year last year. Didn't necessarily see Mondo minutes over at Florida Atlantic, but he was putting up 5.5 points per game, shot 36% for three, is a 6'7", little bit of a combo player. North Texas really was lackluster with their three-point shooting, and for North Texas, you always know that the defense is going to be there. They probably wanted to add a little bit more size and stretchability because they did have a little bit of a tough time on the defensive boards last season. He should be able to help out quite a bit with that regard, and for North Texas, I think that they've done a nice job of looking in the mirror and realizing that they needed a little bit more offense. This should be able to help out with that quite a bit, and additionally, for North Texas, they're bringing in a guy that I like in Cash Chavis, who was over at UT Arlington last season, but was at some bigger schools as well. Mitchell Holmes coming on over from SMU, so they're staying within their backyard, and they're doing a nice job in terms of adding some of these guys. Jordan Crawford, he last year was over at South Dakota. He's going to be a little bit more of an insurance policy for Missouri, but Missouri was uncharacteristically down with their three-point shooting last year. For Crawford, 14.5 points per game, shot 37% from three-point. He heads on over to Missouri. Now, I don't think he's going to be seeing a wild amount of minutes for Missouri, but Missouri is always a team that prides themselves on depth. They did a nice job hanging down low. You bring in Jalen Carey. Kennard Davis should be able to be a nice 6'6" combo player coming over from BYU. Obviously, Bryson Tiller, he's able to block some shots as well. And for Missouri, it felt like they were lacking a little bit of three-point shooting. Now you can have Crawford be coming in off the bench, be able to give you some, shall we say, hot shooting from there. And he's played on some up-tempo teams, College of Charleston and Eastern Kentucky, before heading on over to South Dakota. It's always a team that loves to run it and gun it. So he knows the system. He's going to be able to give you a little bit of offense. So I do like this move for them. You've got Daniel Johnson, who was over at Hampton last season, and he heads on over to James Madison, and he was a starter last year for Hampton. Obviously, Hampton left a lot to be desired on the offensive side of things, but he's a guy that's able to be a nice defender. He stands right in that neighborhood, about 6'5" was able to put in there 10 points, 5 boards, 32% three-point shooting was actually really good for Hampton last season, and he's able to give you like a steal per game as well, good active hands. I think that this is a nice add for James Madison. James Madison just did not have active hands whatsoever. They were able to do an okay job in terms of closing out with some of the shots, but man, they need to put a little bit more ball pressure on. You might not be able to really elevate this offense, but for James Madison, they need to get back to that good, hard defense that Preston Spradlin system always relies upon. Bringing in Gage Lattimore from NC Central helps out with that. Jacob Hagres should be able to help out down low, coming over from Gardner-Webb. Brandon Lee, I thought, was a good add coming over from Illinois. Kevon Riley is going to be able to give you three-point shooting from Delaware, and then Garrett Sondra, KJ Wyndham, they were underutilized guys at the power conference level, so James Madison has done a really good job in terms of filling out their roster, and this was, in my opinion, another relatively solid add for them. Connor Turnbull, he was over at Evansville last year. He heads on over to Utah State. Obviously, this is a Utah State team that's just not going to be the same team, but he was the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year during the 2024-25 season. Just was limited to 16 games this past season due to injury. Began his career over at Butler, a former top 200 recruit, 11.5 points, 6 boards. At 6'11", he was given the team last year 2.4 blocks per contest. So for Utah State, they're going to be looking to maintain that strong defense, and this is a really great add in my opinion, because you just look at the Ben Jacobson system, what he was able to do over at Northern Iowa. Typically his teams were very undersized. Now you've got some good size over here at Utah State. He brings with him one of his own, with Will Hornseth being in there as well. So it feels like it might be a little bit of a, shall we say, change with regards to the style. You bring in AJ Bates to be able to run the point from Louisiana Tech. So McCaglin, he's probably going to be that good outside shooter that comes over from Wright State. Colin Mulholland at 6'10", he's able to do a little bit of everything. And if I'm not mistaken, Carson Templin will be staying with the program as well. So you've got a lot of really good bigs for this program. I like what Utah State is building. Obviously, a new look out there in the both Mountain West and Pac-12. So I do think that they're going to be able to have themselves another nice season out there. For AJ Lesbert, he last season had a redshirt because he was over at Brown. He was injured in general. He wanted to maintain eligibility because you don't get a redshirt out there in the Ivy League. You go back 2 years ago and what he was able to do for the Brown Bears, and he was averaging for them 10.5 points, 3.5 boards, shot in that neighborhood about 37.5% from three-point range, and he heads on over to Merrimack. Brown, always a relatively rock-solid defense, not a team that generates a whole bunch of turnovers, but I think that this is going to be a really good fit for Merrimack, assuming that he's healthy and he had a full year off. I think that much of the reason why he sat out the entirety of the season was just because of the Ivy League rules, and he was probably pondering whether or not he wanted to go back to Brown or not. For Brown, it was a disappointing season for them without him, and for Merrimack, I think that they've done a nice job in terms of revamping a little bit, and they've always struggled with their three-point shooting. Getting a guy like this, bringing in Denver Anglin from Iona, you've got Eli Wilborn, who is going to be able to give you some rebounding from James Madison. I really like what this Merrimack team has done here in the offseason. That's a big one for them, and I think that this one is going to be a relatively solid one as well. You've got Travis Best, who was over at Arizona State last season, heading on over to East Carolina. East Carolina, it's very clear that they look themselves in the mirror because they've always been relatively good with their low post play. In the Michael Schwartz era, they have had absolutely no guard play whatsoever. Now, for Best, he didn't really see a lot of minutes when he was over at Arizona State, but a guy from the great state of North Carolina, so he's heading back to the Carolinas, a guy that's going to be able to give you a little bit of handles, be able to help out this offense, as East Carolina also had a very tough time taking care of the ball, and they've really addressed that offense here in the offseason, bringing in Bryson Blaine, a 15-plus point per game scorer from Charleston. Kane Cooper, 6'6" combo player, was over at Louisiana Tech. Sia Medley is going to be a nice point guard, so you can have him play off the ball. You can have him be a backup point guard. Kasim Watson was a solid three-point shooter over at UTEP, so East Carolina, they're very much looking to turn over a little bit of a new leaf, so I like this for them. Noah Nogard, he was last season over at UNC Greensboro, and he's decided that he is going to be going to Western Kentucky, guy that shot about 37% from three-point range. Now, when Western Kentucky is really going well, they're getting a bunch of second and third chances, they're really hitting the glass. This is not one of those guys that's going to be able to do so, but still, with Western Kentucky, they are looking for a little bit more versatility as well. He was able to do a very solid job for this UNC Greensboro team in terms of being one of their better, shall we say, and more versatile defenders as well, so it helps out on that front as well. Western Kentucky likes to play at a very harebrained style. They're looking to have a lot of depth. They just didn't have that this past year because so many guys got injured that it's not even funny, and I feel like Western Kentucky has done a good job in terms of being able to revamp that depth. Andrew Firkway, he comes over from Marshall. He's going to help out down low along Derek Erkins Ford, who's over at Jacksonville State. You've got a pair of guards, no guard. You also bring in a guy that I like in Sharon Young, who was over at Akron last season. EJ Walker's at 6'8", little bit of a joker player that comes over from South Carolina. So they're building themselves some nice depth, and I feel like a lot of these guys are really going to be able to elevate in general, and I think that this one is going to be an elevator as well. DeAndre Thomas, he was over at Jackson State this last season, the only guy for Jackson State that averaged over 4.5 rebounds per game. He heads on over to Northwestern State. Northwestern State got absolutely killed on the glass. I believe it was Willie Williams, who was a lone player on the roster, that averaged over 3.6 rebounds per game, so they need any sort of low post depth whatsoever. With a lot of teams spending out there in the Southland, Northwestern State really needs to get going because they just flat out haven't had a lot of guys commit to the program. I believe that this is their first Division I recruit. Is he going to be able to be an elevator on the offensive end? I don't think so, but at the very least, they got themselves a little bit of rebounding. This one is going to be able to help them out greatly, so do like to see that one for them. And then you've got someone from Northwestern State heading on over to Jackson State. That'd be Chip Brunt. Mr. Brunt last season didn't necessarily see a whole bunch of minutes, and for Northwestern State, they had a lot of guards that just couldn't rebound. Last year, he was averaging about 3.5 points. Shot 53% from three-point range, albeit it was a pretty small sample size. He took last year 13 threes, and he buried 7 of them, but did begin his career over at UC Riverside. He's a native of the great state of Tennessee. I do think that this is going to be solid for Jackson State. Jackson State just needed a little bit of everything. They were relying upon Deshaun Ruffin to just try to bail them out of everything. Obviously, they don't have Deshaun Ruffin and much of that guard stable anymore, so this is going to be able to help them out. They're going to be able to build a little bit more depth, and they're not going to be completely reliant upon one guy, and being able to have that sort of three-point shooting, I think is going to be able to help them out. And then you've got Afan Trinka. He last season was over at UT Martin, a really good UT Martin defense, and he heads on over to Southern Indiana, so he's staying out there in the OVC. And for Southern Indiana, defense was relatively solid. boy, oh boy, do they need any sort of shooting whatsoever. Now they had a guy in Trinco who shot 28.7% from three-point range. So right now with Southern Indiana, it feels like they're going to be suffering from the same deficiencies that they did a season ago. Trinco about 6.5 points. He was able to throw in their seal per contest. So Southern Indiana still going to be able to do a solid job with regards to defense. They're going to need to take better care of the ball. And UT Martin was one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of taking care of the ball. I did like the fact that they added in their Donovan Hunter, Southern Indiana did, from Bellarmine, and Ellie Hayes has a little bit of upside coming in from UTEP. But for Southern Indiana, again, where's the three-point shooting? Nobody knows at this point, but something that I do know is that I'm staying locked in on all that we're seeing here in the college basketball offseason. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks once again to our guy, Ryan McIntyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, who joined me in segment number 2. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast here in the offseason, taking a look at all the news and notes that we're getting in college basketball. And then when we get in-season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Take care.